All right, we're going to kick this thing off. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Climate Week, New York City's Outdoor Recreational Industry Panel, presented by REI. My name is Gretchen Bleiler, and I'm a two-time Olympic snowboarder, Olympic silver medalist, four-time X Games champion, ESPY Award winner, and entrepreneur. For me, as a professional snowboarder and mountain girl, I've always turned to really the mountains and the great outdoors in general for my own health, inspiration, and to find balance in my life when things get chaotic as they are currently. In my career, I started noticing changes in our winters back in 2005. And I've seen climate change negatively impact my entire snowboard industry and really the entire winter sports community as a whole. So I've been using my platform to mobilize and activate the winter sports community, and in the past years, the overall outdoor recreational community, together with an organization called Protect Our Winters, who you'll hear more from soon. And I've been doing this since 2009. What most people don't know about the outdoor recreational community is that we are powerful. We are an industry that supports 7.6 million jobs and creates 887 billion in economic revenue. So while the fossil fuel lobby may outspend environmentalists 20-1 in DC, the outdoor community shares a passion that crosses state borders and even party lines. Extreme weather is making it harder and harder for all of us to get out, find the creativity, the inspiration, and the balance we gain from doing the sports we love outdoors. So naturally, we want to protect the places and the lifestyles we love from climate change. And really, we're waking up to our power and actually doing that. You'll learn more from Mario around how that's happening. But first, I want to introduce everyone to Mark Barreca. Mark is REI's Co-ops Director of Community Affairs, where he manages policy and charitable giving. Before coming to REI, he served in the Department of Commerce on technology policy and worked for 12 years at Microsoft. Mark lives in Seattle, where he spends his weekends trail running. Hi, Mark. Will you give us a little glimpse into your role at REI?
Sure. I've been at REI for almost 9 years, and I came into the role as our first ever leader of government relations. And we have a small but mighty team at REI headquarters where we pulled together our policy strategy. And then we distribute it across our network of stores, work with our store managers, work with our vendor and nonprofit partners in local communities to hopefully change the world for the better. We also have a pretty generous philanthropic program, and my team oversees that as well.
Incredible. Thank you, Mark. Amy Horton is a Senior Director of Sustainable Business Innovation at the Outdoor Industry Association. Before coming to OIA, she worked for outdoor industry companies and Fortune 500 organizations, helping achieve sustainability goals. Amy grew up in Oregon and is an avid hiker and world traveler. Amy, will you also speak to your role at OIA?
Yeah, still an avid hiker. Used to be a world traveler. Hopefully world traveler again soon, right?
Right.
Thank you, Gretchen. I'm so glad to be here with you guys. Outdoor Industry Association, for those who aren't familiar, is the leading business organization for the outdoor industry. We represent more than 1,000 outdoor businesses, mostly small to mid-size. 90% of our members are actually under 20 million in annual revenue. We exist to help the outdoor industry thrive. And as part of that, among other things, we work with our members to embed sustainability into their business strategies. Climate has definitely come into sharper focus for us as a business imperative. Not only is it the right thing to do, but it's absolutely critical to the business of the outdoor industry. And we are helping our members take bold moves on climate through an initiative we just launched in January called the Climate Action Corps. We'll talk a little bit more about. Happy to be here.
Thank you. Last but not least, Mario Molina. Mario is the executive director at Protect Our Winters, and he has been working on climate policy his entire career, formerly at the Climate Reality Project and consulting with NGOs, corporations, and activists around taking meaningful action to fight climate change. Mario grew up in the highlands of Guatemala, where he fell in love with mountains and outdoor culture. Mario, will you tell us a little more about what your specific work with POW looks like?
Yeah, thank you so much, and great to be here. Thanks for having us. So Protect Our Winters, our mission really is to help people who are passionate, like yourselves, like everyone on this call, about the places and the lifestyle of adventure sports, and help turn that passion into a purposeful and meaningful action to protect those places from the effects of climate change immediately and for future generations. So we work with outdoor creatives and elite athletes, scientists, and business leaders to advance policies that will protect those playgrounds through legislation and regulatory action at both the state and federal level, and finding ways to activate the 50 million plus people who identify as skiers, climbers, mountain bikers on this issue.
Awesome, thanks Mario. So we will have time in this panel to take questions from everyone who's participating, but we're going to start off with some questions that I have. Let's start with, how is your organization, as part of the 887 billion outdoor rec economy, being impacted by climate change? What are you doing to address this crisis? Mark, do you want to kick us off?
Sure, happy to, Gretchen. I'm hoping that a lot of people on the Zoom call today know of REI Co-op, but if you don't, we were founded in Seattle over 80 years ago. Our mission is to equip and outfit people for outdoor lifestyle and inspire them to also steward the planet. Fast forward 80 years, we're now the largest consumer co-op in the country. We have 18 million members. We have 170 stores around the country. And most importantly, perhaps from an economic impact standpoint, we buy products and services from over 1,000 companies around the country, located in almost every state. Back to Amy's comment about OIA and the thousands of members of the trade association, REI helps feed that ecosystem of businesses, and those businesses in turn equip everybody to enjoy time outdoors. On the public policy, on the government affairs side of the shop, for a bunch of years now, the outdoor industry and REI, we've been working to increase our political muscle and our influence. And I'd say that we've had decent success even through the Trump administration on some questions around public lands, like the recently passed Great American Outdoors Act that puts billions against maintenance backlogs. Don't get me wrong, climate change, the issue du jour, is an enormous, enormous issue. And we'll get more into that in a bit, but the outdoor industry is starting to show its influence in DC. And that's largely leveraging the fact that we do represent 2.2% of GDP. And again, as y'all have mentioned, we have more jobs in agriculture than mining, than utilities. So we have this presence. We also are working on increasing our influence at the state and local level. With so many companies in our industry, with so many affiliated or friendly not-for-profits, we really can amplify our voice locally. And now we have outdoor recreation sector leaders in governors' offices in about 17 states around the country. And we're telling the full story of what it means to live an outdoor life. Yes, it's about jobs, it's about economic development, including economic development in rural America, but it's also about our health and well-being, Time outdoors, as we know, during COVID is essential or more essential than ever. And people broadly are getting that time outdoors is actually preventative medicine. We can stay healthier if we get outdoors more frequently. That access to fun outdoors is good for our communities. And then obviously all of this is at risk with climate change. I mean, the fact of the matter is, you know, for us in the industry and for our millions of customers, our millions of outdoorists, life outdoors as we know it is disappearing right before our eyes. We know that when we have these smoke-filled days in the West. We know that when there's a red tide that kills the fishing season off Florida. We know that on the Gulf Coast when, you know, hurricane after hurricane washes across Louisiana in a place people consider a sportsman's paradise. And so as a community, we've got this enormous potential, business potential, not-for-profit potential, and we just have to redouble our efforts to point that against climate change and change policy so that we're friendly to the environment and not sucking the lifeblood out of it.
Amazing. Amy?
Yeah, so how is our organization and our members being impacted, and what are we doing about it? You know, I think our members, the members of OIA, the businesses that Mark spoke about, are impacted in the same way, many of the same ways that large corporates are. Supply chain disruption, supply chains are being disrupted through extreme weather events. That is a risk and a cost. Our consumers, maybe even perhaps to Mario's point, our consumers, maybe even more than other consumers in other industries, care more about this, and they are expecting companies to authentically take action. Customers, there's the customer, you know, the retail brand dynamic. Customers like REI are raising their expectations and care about this. So brands who want to remain relevant are listening. I think what is unique for us, all of those things are sort of similar across other industries in terms of climate impact. What's unique for us is all the things that Mark talked about in terms of the outdoor experience being under threat. And what we're doing about that at OIA for our members, again, recognizing this is a business issue. We exist to help businesses thrive. We are helping our members take action. So that what that looks like is a program called the Climate Action Corps that I mentioned earlier. We just launched in January, 80 members in climbing. And that's kind of one part reduce, so helping our members measure, set targets, drive reductions, and then another part advocate for climate policy. It's all about really the collective and the kind of cumulative impact we can have on both of those things, both reduction and advocacy, when we work together and collaborate and bring that, you know, that economic might together to address climate change.
Great, thank you, Amy. Mario, how is POW being impacted, and what are you guys doing to work on it?
Absolutely. So, Gretchen, as you well know, at the core of POW's foundation 10 years ago, where we're athletes like yourself, winter sports athletes. Although now we've started working with climbers and trail runners as well. But because winter sports athletes realize, in a way, they're canaries in the coal mine in terms of the changing conditions that they started, we started experiencing out in the slopes. So whether it's or even training. So Jesse Diggins, I was talking to Jesse Diggins, who's the United States gold medalist in cross country skiing just a couple of weeks ago, and she talked about how they've had to change their regime or their training locations because they can't rely sometimes on being able to train on the same grounds that they have in the past. And that's the same case. That was the same when we were having a conversation with David Wise, who's also a silver medalist from Nevada, in terms of not being able to train for Olympic sports the same way and with the same predictability in the same places as they have before. And you translate that out into the mountains. We saw, for example, when Caroline Gleich summited Everest a couple of years ago, their summit window was greatly affected by the fluctuation of the jet stream that we had that year, which is a direct consequence of warming in the Arctic. And so the unpredictability and the uncertainty in the mountains, not only around training regimes and summits, which is almost a luxury that we are all privileged, that some of us are privileged to be able to participate in, but then it's a downstream effect. So what happens to people and entire communities around the world who rely on snowpack for water supplies? If we look at California, for example, and the droughts in California, what happens when Sierra snowpack is not as reliable as it has been to agriculture's downstream? So I think in a lot of ways, the way that it affects our sports, particularly winter sports, is really a telltale sign of much graver consequences, cascading consequences downstream if we don't address it quickly. And so the way that POW goes about this is using the voice of our athletes to really activate and mobilize some of the 50 million people who identify as outdoor enthusiasts across the country. So this is Climate Week. A lot of us have attended Climate Week before, and it's such a great gathering, and we tend to see the same people over and over again at events like this, and we are all in violent agreement that we have to do something, and we have to do it quickly. And really what we need to do is we need to grow that voice and extend it beyond those of us that already agree. And the outdoor sports community has huge potential to add to that voice. The environmental community, I think, has done a fantastic job at building the base. But as we've seen, it hasn't been a strong enough base to actually move the needle forward legislatively or sustain regulatory advances. And if we don't need all 50 million people. If we're able to get thousands of people in the right places to show up with climate as a top priority at the right time, particularly this election, we can have a disproportionate impact to our size in moving this conversation and action forward.
Awesome, Mario. So next question. We've seen an increase, obviously, in people talking about the climate crisis. We all can feel the heightened sense of urgency, especially as the West Coast is burning and hurricanes hit the Southeast. It sounds like your members and customers feel the same. Can you talk about the growing demand for action and how you're enabling and empowering them specifically to take action? Mario, do you want to just pick up on that and then we'll go back in the other order?
Sure. Yeah, I think there's now an elevated call for companies and organizations in the outdoor space to actually reflect the values of their consumers. So 61% of outdoor enthusiasts believe that climate change will impact them personally in the short term. 65% see groups as part of the solution. So outdoor enthusiast groups as part of the solution, but 76% are actually looking for direction on how to get engaged and where to start, and want help learning how to do a better advocate. So the way that our founder Jeremy Jones likes to say is like, the hero has changed, and it's not who hawks the biggest cliff or drops the sickest line or sends the hardest climb. It's also who can do that and also reflect the passion and reflect the values of followers and other members of the community. And I think it's the same for the outdoor businesses. And there is a need now where it's not an added bonus to stand for the environment and stand for climate action. It's actually a requirement from consumers that brands and businesses actually stand for those values and stand for that kind of action.
Amy, what is the growing demand you are seeing, and how are you enabling and empowering action within OIA?
Yeah, I could pick right up on Mario's point to say that, and there's a lot of research out there, particularly around Gen Z and millennials, that that customers are not only expecting the brands they buy to be saying something about climate or committing to climate action, but also authentically doing something. I think many of our members are now embracing that, and we see that, we see climate showing up as a top concern among our members. We see also, thankfully, the conversation shifting from why why should we focus on this as a business imperative, to how do I get started and what do I do? So thankfully we're in that conversation now. Like I said, we have 80 members and growing quickly. And they're all working on, some of it's behind the scenes, and customers don't necessarily see it, like sourcing renewable energy, or working deep in your supply chain on renewable energy. But a lot of it does show up to the consumer, like using recycled content, or new kind of product innovation that can design out carbon. So those things are exciting, but it is also, it also means advocating and engaging your consumers. There's huge opportunity there. That's we may, when we consider the number of consumers that we reach across our brands, I think that is really the big opportunity.
Mark?
Yeah, I'll just add a little color to what Mario and Amy have said, a little color from the REI perspective. For sure, individuals are trying to figure out how they can be part of a solution and no longer part of the problem. And so when you think about, in particular, upcoming generations who want to take agency, who want to be responsible for their impact on the planet, they spend dollars. And when they look to spend dollars, they look for organizations, they look for products that they have greater confidence are actually trying to be part of the solution. And so, the outdoor industry, outdoor companies we exist only because there is a healthy outdoors, and we don't exist to the extent that the outdoors starts to disappear with climate change. And so our interests are 110% aligned with those interests of our constituents, if you will. And so, we've got this tremendous opportunity to marry our constituent base. I hesitate to call them consumers because I hate reducing individuals to the act of consumption, right? But our constituents, our members, in the case of REI, we have so much potential to go further together. And to Mario's point, I'd love to bring the traditional environmentalists along with us on this journey. There are tens of millions of people who regularly get outdoors and who want a healthy planet. And we just have to enable them to be part of our community and part of a climate solution. So for example, just this month, REI, other companies in the outdoor sector, for the first time, we're standing up platforms that instruct people on the importance of voting, or they hopefully know the importance of voting, but instruct them on how to find out if they're registered, how to find out where they can vote, how they can get an absentee ballot. So in some respects, this industry of really cool companies, heartfelt companies, we're starting to wake up. We've got a lot of constituents at our disposal. We bring along some traditional environmentalists, and I think there's a lot we can do in the coming years.
I totally agree, and I love hearing the calling us all constituents, because that's what we are, and that sounds powerful to me. So our final question before we get into sort of the live questions that are coming in: what role should the outdoor industry play in helping to address the climate crisis? You each bring a slightly different perspective to this conversation, covering advocacy, consumer interests and policy, or constituent interests and policy. Can you talk about how important it is to blend these efforts to fight climate change? Mark, do you want to just kick us off again?
Yeah, this is sort of just picking up on my last riff. We do need to, as companies, we need to lead by example. And so, if we're talking to policymakers, if we're talking to our constituents about how to go more and more lightly on the land, we better be doing that ourselves as businesses. And so while we're not the highest dollar company or across the industry, while we might not have the resources of some of the biggest companies on the planet, we've got the heart and we've got the ingenuity. And so as companies working with the Climate Corps that Amy's referred to, other vehicles, we ought to be inventing the way to live a more sustainable life and to run more sustainable businesses. We ought to be engaging policymakers ourselves. And as I said, let's bring our constituents along with us. So those are probably the three main areas where I see us contributing.
Love it. Amy, do you want to speak to the importance of blending, advocacy with interests of the constituency and policy?
Yeah, maybe without too much repetition of Mark, I would say that one thing I think the Climate Action Corps is doing well, or is setting out to do, is really priming the business community to be stronger advocates, and to, as Mark said, we're sort of helping empower and equip this community to get their own house in order, so that they can feel that they, it's authentic when they're reaching out to their customer and asking them to take action as well, right? So I think when we think about how we approach this, like I said, OIA has a lot of small to mid-size members. They don't necessarily have a 17-person sustainability team like a large fashion brand might, for example. And so we're just kind of like boots on the ground, DIY, helping these companies take this on and measure, set a target, and start driving reductions through collaboration. 90% of a say roughly 90% of an outdoor industry company's footprint is likely back in the supply chain. Those are difficult to reach carbon emissions, really difficult to reach without collaboration. And so not only are we kind of helping with the nitty-gritty basics, the how-to, we are convening members to collaborate to get at the most difficult parts of their footprint. So kind of approaching it from all different angles.
Great, thanks. Mario, do you want to finish up for us on that question?
Sure. And we approach it from a bit of a broader perspective, and I think it's fantastic, and it's definitely what we should be doing to encourage emissions reductions from within companies, and walking the talk and looking at supply chain reductions. And all of this work is absolutely necessary and a very valuable first step. The reality is that 75-80% of emissions actually come from 25 companies. And those 25 companies are probably none of them are in the OIA roster or customers of REI. We're talking about really large fossil fuel companies that have traditionally been extractive industries and distribution industries that get a lot of subsidies and a lot of support from governments, both local, state, and federal, and who are not actually held accountable for the pollution that they throw out into the atmosphere. So in addition to all of the work that we do internally as companies, I think that the advocacy piece is incredibly important, and using the power of the economic power that we were talking about, the billions of dollars that this industry contributes to the economy, but also educating our consumers on what it is that's actually causing climate change. Less than 30% of the outdoor constituent actually feels like they are well educated on the issue of climate. Whereas about 50 to 60%, depending on how you break them down, feel like they are somewhat educated on the issue of climate. And so when we talk about, it's been great to see the outdoor industry come together and the outdoor community come together, asking people to get out to vote. But what is that connection? Why are we asking people to vote as a response to climate change? Well, the elephant in the room, and let's just call it out. Like, the reality is, this administration is responsible for over 220 environmental regulation rollbacks. It's been the most unprecedented assault on the environment that we have actually seen And so regardless of which party you're affiliated with, there are very, very valid conversations to be had about free market solutions that are neither liberal or conservative, but that are science-based, to advance policies that will get us to climate neutrality in the future. And so I think that as an outdoor industry, being really straightforward about, and it's great, like what to hear what so many of the brands are doing, including REI, like, hey, we care about climate, and thus we have to vote. And the real lesson there is that elections matter and have consequences. And so once we have the elected people in place, we need to actually show the value of the numbers, the value of our economic contribution, and be a voice that is respected in DC, and that has and that we expect accountability from our elected officials.
Great. And I just want to ask you, Mario, specifically, I know that POW is working to use language that is more unifying now than ever before, because we are clearly living in a more divisive world than we ever have been before. Can you speak a little to how POW is using unifying language, since not all outdoor people are liberal or conservative? It's sort of this blend.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. We just released actually a film this week. I encourage people to check it out. Purple Mountains, and it's really Jeremy as the head, as the figurehead of POW, actually having unifying conversations with people on both sides of the aisle. And the reality is that the environment and conservation and the land, the one thing that is true and that unites all of us is the land that we actually recreate in, whether we are hunters or fishermen or snowboarders or trail runners, etc. What America is built on, what the country is built on, is the land itself. And so what we're really hoping is to mobilize all of us who care about the land, whether it's rivers, mountains, crags, forests, to make that a priority when we're making our choice, when we're making our choices of elected representatives, but also of policies that we want to support, and our consumer choices in terms of brands and products that we support. And so ultimately, to us, it all comes back to the land that we share, where we spend our time, where we recreate, where we, to Mark's point, spend our time recharging, and both our body, soul, and spirit being that which is most worth protecting, and the number one thing that we should all be able to come together on.
I'd like to jump in and kind of double down on that point. So, the environmental rollbacks, categorically, like we're putting the vehicle in reverse, if you will, and it's not clear that when you get to real people, leading real lives, that they embrace that, but rather, the agenda perhaps has been taken over by the partisanship, and in what I'll call the real world, red, blue, or purple, people love the outdoors. When I think of where REI has been expanding its network of stores, and where we've last put our new stores, it's in Alabama, it's in Tennessee, it's in Wisconsin, it's in Kansas. People across the country love to get outdoors, and every part of America has some facet of the outdoors that is just, worth cherishing, and that climate change puts at risk. And so it's super helpful for POW to be working on sort of this language, because I think the language, the closer it maps to people's reality, their sense of what's going on close to home, the more they'll embrace it, as opposed to, some sort of crazy ass partisanship.
Hear, hear. Let's rise above the rhetoric and the party lines and vote for the issues we care about most. Amy, do you have any thoughts to add?
I don't. I think Mario and Mark covered it very eloquently, so nothing to add from me.
We only have a couple minutes left, and I want to be sure to take some of these live questions. What is the role of a CEO in corporate action to fight climate change? Who wants to take that one?
Well, we've got a CEO, so I'll try to speak.
Yeah, go for it, Mark.
The thing about the CEO, especially nowadays in America, when the partisanship has stifled a lot of progress, is the CEO now becomes the prominent civic leader. If an elected official is going to default on being a civic leader, then I think it's more than appropriate for a CEO, especially a CEO from companies like REI that have purpose, helping drive them, to stand up and speak to the importance of positive action on climate change.
Great. Mario, do you want to touch on that? Should we move on to the next?
On the interest of time, I say let's move on to the next one. I think Mark did a great job with that.
Thanks, Mark. So this one is a great question. As an outdoor enthusiast, how can I make a difference fighting climate change?
Yeah, I'd be happy to jump on that one.
Mario,
that's all you.
I think the first thing is get educated on the issue, right? And so there are plenty of organizations, but I obviously encourage you to visit the POW website, protectourwinters.org, to become educated on the issue and what it is, what the solutions are, and how it is that you can get involved. Then in the next over the next 40 plus days, the most important thing that we can do is to actually mobilize our networks to register to vote and to vote on this issue across down ballot, regardless again of whether it's Democrat or Republican. Look at the voting record of the candidates on the ballot on issues that matter to us, like environment and climate. And then not only do that, but encourage your network, your friends and your networks to do so. Then once we get past this, I think once we get into January and we get into the coming years, there's always plenty of opportunities to get involved at multiple levels in organizations like POW or companies like REI and the Hawaii Climate Corps membership. We very regularly have ways to get involved and share that through our newsletters, through our emails, on social media, etc. So basically, come join the movement. Come join us.
Yeah, I'll just jump in there, Gretchen, and I think POW does an awesome job connecting with the outdoor enthusiasts. I would encourage outdoor enthusiasts to, yes, vote. Agree with Mario. There's great platforms out there. OA has Vote the Outdoors, but also vote with your dollars. Look for brands that are actually really authentically leaning into climate. You can go to our website and see who are members of the Climate Action Corps, and go to their websites and read their stories about what they're doing. It's about progress over perfection, and I think that's the other thing I would encourage, and that can make a difference.
I would just add that it sounds hackneyed, it sounds trite, but thinking globally and acting locally really does matter in this space. I've been lucky enough to do some Washington, D.C., Capitol Hill advocacy alongside POW. But state legislative bodies are just as important, especially if Congress can't get its act together. Local authorities, cities can do more to advance their acquisition of low carbon vehicles, do more to promote low carbon transit, to create more bike lanes, et cetera. And so, there's plenty of places to plug in, and there are organizations that are looking for more people to plug in. The voice of the individual constituent is really well heard in these different venues, because it's the authentic voice of the human being that cares deeply about something. And so don't underestimate the power of one here if you come along on the journey.
Yeah, and Gretchen, if I can just tag on kind of to what Mark said in terms of the voice of the individual constituent, the way I think of this, and I share this often, is calling our representatives should not be any more intimidating than calling customer support at any brand that we buy a product from. These elected officials work for us. They get paid by our tax dollars, and we never hesitate if we get a deficient product or if we get a deficient service from one of our providers, whether it be a ski mountain or whether it be a jacket. We are, usually the outdoor community members, we're the first ones to get on the phone with the warranty department or with customer service and demand that it get done right? it shouldn't be any different when we call our elected representatives. If we have elected them to actually move forward on climate, if we are prioritizing this, if this actually matters to us, they are quality control for our government, and we should be incredibly more passionate about the quality control of our government than in most of the products that we purchase. So really encouraging people to be active and remain involved in the civic process the way Mark's talking about, not only during elections, but also more importantly, after elections as well.
I totally agree, Mario, and I am sort of like the example of somebody who was afraid to do that, but with POW's work, POW is basically an organization who's holding our hands to help us become better advocates and call our representatives and do it with confidence. So if anyone out there is interested in starting to use their voice more vocally, Protect Our Winters is a great place to start and become a member of the outdoor state. 2 more questions, guys. What are some long-term actions your organization is taking to combat climate change?
You want me to start, guys? Or I'm
Sure.
happy to jump in there. The Climate Action Corps' kind of North Star goal, and I really hope we meet this a lot sooner than 2050, but that's when science says we need to be at net zero. But our North Star goal is to be, the first industry to be climate positive. That is sort of, to give back more than we take. So we're focused on reduction right now, reducing all that we can. I think in the very near term, this needs to shift to also how do we remove more carbon from the atmosphere than we emit through, meaningful offset strategies that are kind of mission aligned with the outdoors. Thankfully for us, protecting forests and sequestering more carbon in the land is a win-win, and sort of creating spaces to recreate and reducing carbon. So those are some of the longer term commitments. We're really focused right now on the launch of our new climate policy platform. So POW contributed to that. REI was on the committee helping us to develop it. And I really hope it's actually not long term. I hope that in the near term, everyone on this call and hopefully some of you listening in are working together to get a meaningful piece of, bring our voice, kind of the business voice and the outdoor enthusiast voice to that conversation to get some meaningful climate legislation passed post-election. Let's all hope. So those are some of the somewhat near and longer term ambitions of the OIA.
Thanks, Amy.
I'll go next because I actually don't have that much to say. We're in the midst of Climate Week, and for people watching live, it's Wednesday. If you're picking this up on Facebook, it's Thursday or later of Climate Week 2020. And since for me right now, live, it's Wednesday, I can't share anything. I just say Climate Week is not over, and go to www.rei.com/newsroom Thursday or later, or check your inbox if you're an REI member. So I'm officially ducking the question, but on Thursday, there's more.
Ooh, good teaser, Mark. Thank you. Mario?
We'll continue to grow the outdoor state. We have 50 million people that we know we can reach and ideally mobilize. And so continuing to grow our constituency and also continuing to work with brands and brand partners and really pushing us to move into areas that might be uncomfortable, but that are necessary as collective advocates in the business side.
Yes, I think getting uncomfortable is a big part of this work, and I can't remember who said it, but someone said that the Earth is about 1 million miles outside of her comfort zone, so it's going to take all of us getting a little bit outside of ours as well. Last question, what brings you hope?
I'll
People.
No. Yeah.
Go ahead, Mark.
So, this is an odd way to have hope, but you know, politics and policy are driven by people who've ascended to power over the last 10, 20, 30 years. And, you know, they have failed to steward the policy portfolio of the country and of the world in the climate change space. Their constituents now are starting to see the real world impact of their policy failures. I mean, when fishing season in Florida is canceled because the Gulf is chronically too warm and polluted, then when the Trump administration is protecting the Gulf Coast of Florida from offshore drilling because of the harm done to, you know, the onshore recreation opportunities or the nearshore recreation opportunities, then you start to see that because people are feeling these real world consequences, they are going to start to be heard. So that's one dimension. The other dimension that gives me hope is, you know, individuals, we don't live forever, you know, and the upcoming generations, they are likely pretty, I'll just go ahead and say it, pissed that their senior generations haven't taken care of this, and they're going to be demanding more and more action faster and faster.
Thanks, Mark.
Go ahead, Mario.
Yeah, very, very similar. To me, it's, well, two things. One, it's technology, and the other is people. And technology, we've just seen leaps and bound advances. So the price of solar and wind energy have now dropped far below that of fossil fuels in most markets. When you compare them on a level playing field. And we've seen just incredible advancements. I don't know how many of you might have actually seen Tesla's announcement that because of battery technology breakthroughs, they may be able to get electric vehicles, electric Teslas to market by under $25,000. Like the curve, like the exponential curve in technology advancement, and the drop in the curve in terms of costs is like nothing we've seen since the cell phone. And so that's happening really rapidly. Financing systems are catching up to the importance of investment in renewable energy. And then we see that adoption being pretty widespread and quickly moving mainstream by big companies like General Motors and, you know, some of the more traditional automakers, etc. Advancements in how we make product in the outdoor in the outdoor industry as well. So technologically, we have the solutions, and it's just a question of can we deploy them at scale in the time frame that we have. And in order to do that, what we really need is a cultural shift that will drive the policies. And I think we're starting to see the cultural shift, and particularly in the outdoor space and outdoor industry. I remember when we first did our voting initiative in 2018, when PAL first did its voting initiative in 2018, with climate as a priority or environment as a priority, we felt a little bit lonely. It was like a few scattered voices here and there going like, vote for the environment, you know, and, you know, just if you go on social media right now, it's pretty much everywhere. And, you know, brands are coming on board, businesses are coming on board, athletes are coming on board, and the general constituents are coming on board. So I think we are seeing this surge of urgency amongst the outdoor constituency to make environment and climate a priority across all civic engagement. And to me, that's really exciting. And the conversations that I have on the trail, the conversations that we have on the mountains are more and more centered around how can we make a difference? What kind of impact can we have?
Wonderful. Amy?
Yeah, maybe I'll just kind of paraphrase because I agree with both Mark and Mario. I think one of the most hopeful voices on climate, in addition to all the wonderful youth voices out there right now, especially these young women and young women of color, I think one of the other sort of voices that I've listened to quite a bit over the last year is Saul Griffith. If you're not familiar, look him up. He's got a completely different perspective about how we can do this. And he, similar to what Mario said, he, you know, I'll butcher his quote, but he says something like, we have all the tools and the technologies that we actually need today. They exist today to decarbonize, to have a better world, and we can have a better world. What we need is political will and business leadership. I'll add that one, and then you know, maybe we could add a third, which is to really activate the outdoor enthusiasts. And I, you know, that gives me hope.
Amazing. You all are so inspirational. Mark, Amy, Mario, thank you. Thank you all for listening today. For anyone that was inspired by any of these points of action, I think there were a lot of things called out. I just encourage you to listen to that inspiration and act on it. You've got 3 amazing resources here to become a part of. So I highly encourage that. Thank you all so much.
Yeah,
Thanks,
and Gretchen, thank you for using your platform and your advocacy as well. It's always great to see you pushing it out.
We're all in this together, right?
Right on.
That's right.
Awesome.
Thank you, Gretchen. Thanks, everybody. Take care.
Ciao.
Bye-bye.
Bye.